Hey, what's up you guys? My name is Min and welcome back to my channel. So today I want to share with you guys how I was able to buy my first house at 23 and also how I paid $0 for it. So this here is my first home that I bought back in March of 2009. It was a foreclosure. It's a single family home with 2,167 square feet and I paid $194,000 for it. Now this video might be considered clickbait because you can't replicate some of these today, but you might find some useful information nonetheless. So the first thing I did was I made sure that I graduated college as soon as possible. So I actually graduated when I was 20 years old. And the way I did this was I actually graduated from high school in 3 years. And the idea behind this is that the faster you can get out of school, the faster you can start earning a wage. Now I'll be honest, I wasn't the smartest person in school. You know, I got a 3.8 GPA. It's nothing to brag about. And I actually had to take 3 English classes on my last year of high school because I actually got a D in my English 9 class. Embarrassing, I know. But nonetheless, I was able to get out in 3 years, and then I went on to community college for 2 years, and then I went to a state college and got my degree in mathematics in 2006. Now shortly after that, I landed my first job and I was making $31,200. Now I mentioned this in my other video, but living at home is probably one of the best ways to save money or pay off debt fast. While living at home, I was tempted and I wanted to buy a new car. I wanted to move out and live in my own place. I even almost moved in with 4 of my friends. Luckily, my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, convinced me not to do that and to just stay home and live with my parents. This also allowed me to pay off some of my credit card and student loan debt, as well as save up some of my money so that I can have it for a down payment. The next thing I did for extra money was I had a couple side hustles that I was doing at the time. So I mentioned this in my other video, but I actually used to sell a lot of things on eBay. In particular, I would sell things like Nintendo Wii's, any popular electronics at the time. I would find items on deal websites and find price mistakes and buy them at really low prices so I can resell them on eBay for a profit. I actually have a pretty decent eBay account that I use to sell things from time to time. I think I have over 280 positive feedback. And so you can see I've done a lot of selling on there. Now the Nintendo Wii was a hot item back when I was living at home and everybody seemed to want one. And I remember waking up really early and going to Toys R Us and Target or Best Buy or even setting up alerts on Amazon so that I can be the first one to buy them when they became available. I would drag in my girlfriend, I would drag in my brother. I'd ask them to go and buy me some so that way I can go and flip it for a profit. I would just take them out to lunch afterwards to repay them for their time. I made over $8,000 doing this. I sold about 90 Nintendo Wii's, averaging about $90 in profit for each Nintendo Wii that I had, and I used this money to pay off my student loans and my credit card debt. I also picked up side jobs and did IT work on the side. My wife was an intern at a small tax prep business, and her boss needed some upgrades to the computer hardware that they had, and he also wanted to set up some backups, so I went and did all that for him for a really small cost, and he paid me about $800 to $1,000 for all of the work that I did for him. Now when you're young, you don't really know a lot about investing, but I actually did do a little bit of investing before I actually bought my first home. This one is kind of like black market investing. My parents know some people that will kind of take in money and actually loan it out to people to buy their first homes. It's a little bit dangerous, but I took a little gamble. And basically what would happen is I would put in $300 a month each month for 18 months, and they would give me a return of about $20 to $40. So you can see there the math works out to be like 6 to 13% return. And it gets worse as you put more money in because you don't actually make the interest on the money you already have in there. You only make it every month. And so, as time goes on, you basically keep putting $300 in, they keep giving you $20 to $40. And then at the end of the 18 months, you would get your full $5,400 back. And you would keep all of the interest or dividends that they would pay you. So this was kind of like a private savings account. And then at the end of the 18 months, I got that lump sum back, which really helped me save a lot of money. The next thing that I did was to make sure that I had good credit. And good credit is important because if you're trying to buy a house, you're most likely going to need to borrow money. And so you need to demonstrate to the banks that you can actually repay any credit cards that you have. So I made sure that every single credit card that I owned was on time, payments were made. Even if I had to carry a balance, I made sure that I paid every single one at least a minimum to make sure that I don't default on any of them, which would essentially ruin my credit score. This is important to make sure that you get the best loan possible and the lowest interest rate, and also so that you can get pre-approved with more lenders. The next thing I did was when I was looking for homes, I only looked at used homes. I noticed that a lot of my coworkers at the time were buying new homes, and while new homes sound great, there is a markup on those new homes. The construction companies have to make a profit somehow, so they're going to be marking up those things maybe 10%. And I started to notice that the new homes were generally a little bit smaller, maybe 300 to 500 square foot smaller, and about 10 to 20% more in costs. And so I just stayed away from those homes and focused mostly on foreclosures and short sales. Now, the only real advantage of buying a new home during this time was that in California, there were a couple state credits that they qualified for. They weren't even guaranteed, but they were up to about $10,000, and they would pay you in 3 installments. So you were kind of taking a gamble in hopes that California would actually pay you those credits. Now, there's nothing wrong with buying a used home, and homes last for a long time. So really, the only reason to buy a new home is if you really just want to move in and not do any kind of work to it. Now, the next thing is probably more about luck than anything, and I was fortunate enough to be born at the right time and actually be ready to buy a home at this time, and that is the 2008 recession. So the recession had just happened and everything was kind of falling apart. There were homes everywhere being foreclosed, and people that had good credit and still had jobs was a little bit rare because people were foreclosing on their homes, so that automatically meant that their credit was terrible. They couldn't just go and buy another home after they already dumped their homes, so they had no way of going out and buying a new home. So only people like me or other millennials that were kind of growing up during this time were able to actually go and buy a home because their credit was pretty much pristine. And if they were fortunate enough to work in an industry that wasn't affected by the recession, then they were the prime candidates for the lenders. So I was fortunate enough to be ready to buy a home during this time. Now, 2009 wasn't the lowest in the market, but it was pretty close. And I actually wasn't even looking for a home at this time. I was actually looking for a 1-bedroom apartment, and my wife actually convinced me I should just go buy a house instead. I was making about $48,000 a year, and I had no debt, and I had a decent amount for a down payment, so I started looking around for homes. Now, if you're wondering when the lowest time was, it was around 2011. That was probably the lowest point of the housing market. And if you bought a home in 2011, consider yourself lucky. I consider myself lucky for buying a home in 2009, but if you bought one in 2011, you basically bought that home at the lowest possible price. And in 2020 today, it'd probably be impossible to find a home of my size for the $194,000 that I paid for. The next thing I did was when you get your loan and you find your house, make sure you negotiate your closing costs with the lender. Now, during this point in time, a lot of the homes were actually owned by the banks and not actual sellers. The only time you actually dealt with a seller was when it was a short sale, and most of these homes were actually foreclosures during this time. So 90% of the time you were most likely dealing with the bank, and if you got an FHA loan, then you were eligible for up to 6% closing costs. So my real estate agent always asked for 6% in any offer that we wrote out, and for this particular home, they countered with a 5% closing costs, and 5% for the most part covered almost all of my closing costs. The only thing that I had to come up with was the 3.5% down payment, which ended up being about $7,000. Now, it's pretty hard to ask for sellers to pay for closing costs these days because that takes money out of their bottom line, and most likely they're not going to help you, so you're going to have to come up with this money on your own. So you're probably wondering, how the heck did I get this house for $0? Well, during the housing crisis of 2008, the Senate passed a Housing and Economic Recovery Act, and what this did was it gave first-time home buyers an $8,000 tax credit for the purchase of their first home. The nice thing about this was they actually allowed you to buy the home in 2009 and actually claim it in 2008. So because I bought my home in March of 2009, I was able to file my 2008 taxes with that home purchase. And so by doing that, I actually got $8,000 back for buying that home, ultimately making my first home a $0 out-of-pocket house. So I just had to wait a couple weeks and I got my tax return and I was able to get all of my down payment back. And fortunately this happened because I didn't have a lot of money and I needed that money to buy new appliances for my house and also buy some paint and do some other basic repairs before we moved in. Now, this Housing and Economic Recovery Act wasn't always an $8,000 tax credit. It actually was a $7,500 loan prior. And if anybody bought their home in 2008, they actually only got $7,500 and they actually had to repay back this $7,500 over 15 years. And some of you are still paying this back in the form of a $500 tax payment every year until you repay back the entire $7,500. Fortunately for me, I waited until March and the Senate actually changed the law and actually allowed it to be a full tax credit. So anybody buying their home in 2009 or 2010 was able to claim the entire amount as a tax credit instead of an interest-free loan. That's how I was able to buy my first house for $0 out of pocket. I know that you guys can't replicate this today, but I will leave a link below to a website that you guys can try. There are a couple state programs that you can try for first-time home buyers. You may get some money back, you may get some lower interest rates. You guys can check it out in the link below. If you plan on buying your first home soon, I have another video that goes through the entire process of buying your first home. Make sure you check out that video. I talk about tips, I talk about how to save money on closing costs, I talk about the right loan to get. There are a lot of useful things in there on how to save money and also what to look out for. The video is a little bit long, but it goes into great detail so that you don't make the same mistakes that I made. Buying your first home isn't easy like buying a car, so make sure you start paying down that debt and start saving some money. You only need as little as 5% to buy a home these days. And if you can get the right loan that pays for most of your closing costs, you can get your home for as little as 5 to 10% down, which isn't that hard. So start saving and create a plan and you'll be there in no time. Alright you guys, hopefully that video was helpful. If it was, don't forget to hit the like button and share it with one of your friends. And if you enjoy videos like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and hit the notification bell so you're aware when new videos are uploaded. And as always, have a nice day.